Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is the Must Read Alaska show coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. My co-host John Quick in the Kenai. I'm Suzzane Downing. Monday morning is really a great, beautiful morning out there in Anchorage. How's everything in Kenai?
Things are going well in Kenai. Snow is melting, and we're going to be excited to when this is finally all melted and folks can go back to hiking and exploring and fishing and doing all those fun things that they do on the Kenai.
Don't they do snow machining at this time of year?
Yes, and we're praying that the second or third winter does not come. We're hoping that this is the last of the winters.
I don't know why this winter seems so long. I mean, it just seems like it's been a super long winter on just about every way possible. Well, we've got a really big newsletter this morning, John, and I just want to remind everybody to check it out. If you get it in your inbox, great. You know that it's there already, usually there by 8 a.m., sometimes as early as 6. If you don't have it in your inbox, you can sometimes find it on our Facebook feed. I post it there when I remember to do that. And this newsletter is just huge this morning because I spent last week up in Fairbanks and hanging out with about 351 Republicans delegates at the convention. As a Republican state convention. They haven't had one for 4 years, John. And so that was actually really great. So we're going to talk about some of that today. And I just really want to give a shout out to our show host, Charlie Pierce for Governor. He sponsors our podcast. I super appreciate Charlie Pierce for Governor for being the first sponsor of the Must Read Alaska podcast, and so that we can do great things and reach a lot of people here. So thank you, Charlie Pierce for Governor. I just noticed, John, that the Alaska Airlines has canceled its nonstop flight from Anchorage to Honolulu. So I will not be going to Honolulu anytime soon. We're definitely somewhere in Alaska for the time being. I was actually thinking about popping out for a few days and taking a few days off, but forget it. I don't know. Alaska Airlines is struggling, man. Come on.
I think they used to have a one-way to Vegas. I don't know if they still do anymore.
It's really a bummer when you can't fly from Anchorage to Honolulu nonstop. You have to go through Seattle. That adds so many hours because usually it's just like you could hop on the plane and 5 hours later, you're in Honolulu. But beautiful weather out there today. And in Juneau, I know it's foggy, patchy fog. It's going to rain. First day for cruise ships in Juneau. There'll be one ship in from, I think it was Norwegian Cruise Lines has a big ship in today. I don't know how many people are on it, but they're coming into a really rainy, dank Juneau day. And of course, up on the hill at the Capitol, before the cruise ship gets there, there'll be a bunch of climate change activists with their signs made out of oil and their raincoats made out of oil. And their
gotta love that.
Shoes made out of oil, and they're going to be on the steps of the Capitol protesting the cruise ships because the cruise ships are bad for Alaska. They say they don't want them, and these are all government workers who hate the private sector. And so welcome to Alaska. Here's our version of Antifa on the steps of the Capitol. Hopefully they'll behave.
So how did the convention go? Tell us a little behind the scenes inside scoop on it.
Well, it was really a great convention. They didn't have one 2 years ago. They had one on Zoom, and it was like really boring. I mean, you plug it into Zoom, and then all of a sudden they go in executive session. If you're not a delegate, I'm not a delegate. I'm just a guest. So, I don't get to see what's going on in executive session. You just have a blank Zoom feed. And so that was kind of boring 2 years ago. They really struggled with the Zoom feed because nobody really knew what Zoom was 2 years ago. Really, it was so new to people. Very few people used it. Now we're doing our show on Zoom. We use it all the time. But it was not a way to sort of knit together the community of conservatives in Alaska. It's just tough. So this was the first one in 4 years. And boy, people were sure happy to get together. They were sure happy to see each other. And I noticed that there were a few people that were missing, people that maybe would have been there but have passed in the past few years. And I do remember some of them that kind of looked around the room and sort of missed people like Myrna Maynard, who died in 2019, and she would have been there in 2020 had there been a convention, and certainly this year. But all in all, it was really neat because we saw a lot of new faces. About 40 to 60% of the attendees of that convention were young people who had never attended a Republican convention before. And, the Republican convention is where all the sort of, any political convention, not just the Republicans, but it's where all the kind of crazy stuff happens. It's where all the ideas get laid out for the platform. Are we going to support this? Are we going to support that? Are we going to oppose this or that? And the people make their proposals, they get debated. Sometimes it gets very contentious, but then they vote on it, and then that is that. So they worked on some of their platform, and it passed a few things like there's always a resolution to disband the U.S. Department of Education. And of course, that passed pretty much unanimously this time as well. There was a resolution to oppose a group that is called FACL, which is the Foundation for something legislative something. And it's a really scorched earth conservative group that some people in the Valley have been taking their training. And basically what they do is they just blow up conservatives, because if you don't pass their litmus test for who is conservative enough, they will just burn you down. They're really a burn you down group. And they passed a resolution to oppose that tactic, because there've got to be some sideboards on how you treat your fellow conservatives. You've got to give some grace to people and allow people to have their points of view. FACL just doesn't approve of that. They say, if you don't meet the litmus test, then you should be burned down, and they will go after you in the worst way possible. That was an interesting resolution brought forward by Representative Kevin McCabe, and it passed. And as you may have seen, because we had a really interesting candidate forum, and it had all the candidates up there, and so for Congress.
What was the mood? No. What was the mood? Between Nick Begich and Sarah Palin? Was that a interesting dynamic to see on the stage? Kind of
interesting dynamic, and I posted a little clip of it. Now, let's back up. They weren't all there. The party had invited the people that it thought had the best chance of moving forward on the ballot, and they did that just using their own experience and judgment. There were some people that you might have wanted to include, but weren't included on that panel, like Stephen Wright, who has run against Don Young's a couple of times. And in the last time he ran, he got 10,000 votes. So he got the protest vote, I guess you could say, against Don Young in the primary. But he wasn't invited, but there were 5 of the 16 Republicans who were running for Congress were invited to be part of this panel. And so it was Nick Begich, Tara Sweeney, John Coghill, Sarah Palin, and Josh Revak. And it started out with just introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about yourself. And Nick Begich started out by saying that he just wanted everybody to know in the audience that they were not a bunch of good old boys network, because Sarah Palin had gone on social media the day before, and because she didn't get an endorsement from the party, she went on social media and just said the Republican Party is just a big good old boy network, and that she was there to fight for the people, the hardworking people, the God-fearing people, the good people of Alaska. And it's like, it was so insulting to all of these grassroots people who showed up. The people who were there for the first time, for her to call them a good old boys network. 40 to 60% of the people who were there for the first time. Yeah. And, it was kind of rude, quite honestly.
She seemed to kind of backtrack her comments because she probably realized that they were rude and just not true.
I think they just didn't land very well. People said, gee, do you really want to go there? Because there was another opportunity to be endorsed. And that was that. There is another opportunity to be endorsed. The party has a method for getting endorsed, which is you have to sit down. First, you make an appointment with the party chairwoman. You sit down with her and you go over the party platform, and she asks you, do you basically agree with our platform? Because are you really a Republican? Do you basically agree with this platform? And I mean, that's kind of important. And then you make a request to the state central committee, and that's all sort of elected people. That's like the legislature for the party. They're elected at their district level. So they have a voting membership in the party. And you make an appointment to, a request of them that you can be endorsed. And then they meet and they debate it, and then they vote. And so it's sort of like the parties run like the legislature in that regard. It's representative government. And, Nick had done that. Nick Begich had made the appointment with Ann Brown. He had sat down for an interview, and then he put in his formal application for the next SCC meeting, which was last Thursday, and he was endorsed. So it was like Nick got an A on his paper, and then all the other 4 that were invited to the convention, they wanted to copy his homework. They wanted to, they pulled the equity card, which is, it's not fair. We need, you can see over the fence because you're tall. We need a stool so we can see over the fence. It's that equity thing. And so they definitely made a request that they should all be endorsed as well. And, it was debated, and then ultimately it was actually just voted down by well over 50%, just because if you want to be endorsed, you still have an opportunity. Our next meeting is in July. You can be endorsed in July, but go through the process. Don't skip over it and then think that you can just by acclamation be endorsed. That's not how it works. So they decided that they weren't going to endorse anybody else but Nick for Congress at that time.
Wow. That's a lot of people want to circumvent the process, jump to the front of the line because possibly they're a celebrity or whatever, they feel entitled. And turns out you have to go through the process just like everybody else. And I think maybe comical.
I think maybe Sarah Palin thought that she could just walk in and then she could get the endorsement, and that she was going to be a rock star at the convention, because she's a rock star everywhere she goes down south. I don't know that she read the room all that well when she showed up. She definitely did not have the kind of adulation that we've seen for her in the past. Some people went up to her and wanted to get selfies because she's kind of a rock star in that regard, but there just wasn't that big of a buzz around her. She showed up late on, she showed up late on Friday. She was supposed to show up at 4. She showed up for the dinner. And then she left. And then she showed up on Saturday for the forum and then left. And so, during the forum, I just noticed that Sarah Palin had a lot more conciliatory attitude toward the audience. Instead of calling them a good old boy network to their face, she was much more gentle. She said she appreciated everybody helping her as her campaign for city council, her campaign for mayor of Wasilla, her campaign for, Oil and Gas Conservation Commission of Alaska, for governor and for vice president. She was very gracious and thanked people for helping her. And so she had completely changed her tune when she was in front of them. She wasn't calling them a good old boy.
Yeah,
network.
Her campaign manager probably said, "Listen, you're sounding like a egotistical celebrity here. You got to tone this down." You actually the people of Alaska actually have to like you if you want to get elected.
Yeah. She was a little bit of a whiny baby when she was on social media, just blasting the party for having not just endorsed her by acclamation. And it was just absolutely ridiculous. But and then Tara Sweeney, she was up there, and unfortunately she during her remarks, she lectured the audience and said she thought it was really unfair that they had endorsed Nick Begich before they even got to hear from her and the others. And you don't get an invitation to somebody's house and then you go in and start criticizing their flatware and their stemware. I mean, she basically criticized the party, and people were just looking at each other saying, I've never seen her here at a meeting before. I've never seen her at any kind of a Republican meeting before. And so she walks in and criticizes the party for what she says is unfair. It's like, okay, well, thanks for playing,
Well,
whatever.
those will be her fundraising talking points to the middle voter.
That's right. Is that
yeah.
I'm not really an insider of the Republican Party. I'm an outsider. Well, she's definitely an insider in politics. She's very much embraced by the Lisa Murkowski campaign people. And then that's her insider group is Lisa Murkowski. So there was that. And then they had a question. It was really funny. It was Craig Campbell who was the MC, and he did a great job. Craig Campbell is our former lieutenant governor, and he just is such a great MC. He asked everybody, so in ranked choice voting, you've got these 5 people up on the stage. Presume you're going to vote for yourself for in the first place. Who would you pick as your second place? And so it's like trick question, right? Because all your competitors are on the stage. And pretty much all of them picked John Coghill because he's such a nice guy.
He's like the least amount of drama of any of the
no drama.
Such
a good guy, such a prayerful man, and also because he poses no threat to any of them because he's his campaign is really not quite getting off the ground. I was in Juneau at a fundraiser last week before he went to Fairbanks, and I understand that nobody went. It was just a fundraiser, and actually nobody attended. So he's not really getting his campaign off the ground, even though he's quite well liked. He's a former state senator that was bounced out of office by a truck driver who said that he didn't have the right stance on the PFD. So he got bounced out of office because he was too closely aligned with Kathy Giesel, the former Senate president. But anyway, everybody loves John Coghill. And goes to John Coghill, who would you vote for your second place person? He looked to his right and looked to his left. He's like, yeah, I can't decide. I just can't decide. So he couldn't pick anybody up on stage.
Because he doesn't want to be mean.
Yeah, didn't want to be mean, didn't want to hurt his feelings. I was like, okay, so that was a classic John Coghill statement. And so, yeah, I think, so Nick took a shot at Sarah Palin for having called everybody the good old boy network. And he said, you're not the good old boy network. You are the salt of the earth, Alaskan conservative backbone of the party, out there door knocking. You've been at it for years. And I really appreciate you, that kind of thing. And then Tara Sweeney was basically, she lectured them. John Coghill, I don't remember anything that he said that was truly memorable. What I remember about Sarah Palin is a lot about me. It was that everybody said that she said, thank you for helping me with my campaign for city council and helping me with my campaign for mayor. And you helped me with my campaign for governor. And for, it was a little bit too me. And then I think Josh Revac took a pot shot at Nick Begich for creating jobs overseas. And people were not impressed with that. They're just like, yeah, well, said by a guy who's never done anything but work for the government. Okay, great, good. It didn't land that well. And I think he lost friends there. He lost some momentum. And I think maybe Tara Sweeney lost a little momentum as well. Just the question that they were asked is that really kind of hurt Tara most was, with transgenders in women's sports, should men be allowed to compete in women's sports? And she just basically said, we should be very careful. This is a trick question. These people are struggling with very deep issues and they need to be treated with kindness and consideration. And we just have to be really careful because there's a very high rate of suicide amongst transgenders and people struggling with these gender identity issues. And she never answered the question. Actually, people in the audience booed at her for that. And then when they got to the next person to answer, it was Nick Begich. And he just said, okay, let's just be clear. Men are men and women are women. And men should not be competing in women's sports. And of course, the crowd went wild and they just clapped and everything. So that was another moment during the debate, the forum that really drew some strong sort of images of who people really are. It wasn't really a trick question. It's a very important question, I think, to a lot of Republicans right now.
Yeah, we recently did our poll on our Facebook maybe last week, and we asked the question: should kindergarten teachers be talking to their kindergartners about sexuality? And hundreds of people responded. 100% of everybody said absolutely not.
Right. So that is kind of the conservative vibe out there on that question. Another really interesting thing happened at the convention that very few people understand outside of the party, but they will be talking about it very, very soon. And this story was posted last night by me at Must Read Alaska at about 11:30 at night. Let me tell you, I stayed up late on this story to try to figure it out. So what they did is they changed the rules of the Republican Party and to redefine what it means to be a member of the Republican Party. So at this point, John, I'm a registered Republican, but I am not a member of the Alaska Republican Party, and neither is the chairwoman of the party, Ann Brown. She is not a member of the Alaska Republican Party. They've changed the definition of what it means to be a member. So I'm a participant as a registered party member. I'm considered a participant. Ann Brown, who is the chair of the party, is a participant. All of the voters who are registered Republicans are participants. All of the people who are district chairs and regional representatives for the party. Remember, I said this is a legislative style system where people vote for their representatives to the party. They're all participants. To be a member, you have to actually apply for membership with something that is a new membership committee. Now, they're doing this because people like Bill Walker, China Bill, he could right now go down and under ballot measure 2, he could register as a Republican and be on the ballot as a Republican. And the Republican Party and its voters have no ability to control their own primary anymore because ballot measure 2 took away their primary. So Bill Walker could show up on the November ballot as a Republican and without ever having to go through a Republican primary. And this has been something that's been vexing the Republicans ever since ballot measure 2 passed. So now a candidate, like if Bill Walker wanted to register as a Republican, he'd have to go to the membership committee and apply to be a member of the party. And then a member is a candidate that has had the approval of that committee. Now, why this matters is because they're going to take this to the Attorney General and say, we have changed the definition of membership for the Republican Party. So people who have not been through this process, the state of Alaska is not allowed to put them down as a member, as an R. Only we can say they're an R. If they're a candidate, they have to be a member in order to get the R on the ballot. It's a really, really big deal. Hard to explain, but they're trying to keep the fakers out. For instance, you've got Chris Constant right now. He's a Democrat. He's running for Congress. He has no chance, right? Well, pretty much no, he has no chance. But he's got pretty good name recognition. What if you just decide to put an R by his name instead of a D? He might, get a few more votes. Maybe he could get in the final 4, right?
Yep.
Or Zach Fields. Zach Fields is one of the hardest, most radical Antifa style Democrats that they have in the Democratic Party in Alaska. He's kind of their version of David Eastman, hardcore, and take no prisoners kind of a person. Well, Zach Fields could put an R by his name and run statewide and just say, hey, I'm a Republican now. So they've created a vetting system, and this is going to be a big challenge, John, for the state, because ballot measure 2 says that Republicans cannot have their own primary, and the Republicans have responded by saying, fine, then we're going to redefine what it means to be a member, because the law says that when you are a member of a party, that initial like R or D will go by your name. Did I explain it clearly enough?
I think so. I think that the Republican Party has figured out a way to outsmart Kendall Scott for the first time in the history of America.
Oh, Scott Kendall.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, him too. Well, the thing is that this obviously could be contested in court, but the ballot measure 2 says membership, and the party has said, okay, fine, we're going to redefine what membership means. Everybody's a participant, but members have to go through the membership committee. Now, that committee is going to be made up of the National Committee woman and the National Committee man. Those people are voted again through that representative democracy kind of thing, where you vote into people into offices in the party. And they'll head it up, and there'll be 17 members of that committee. Seven of them will be the regional representatives, which are kind of the state executive committee. And then the 8 will be appointed by the state central committee to that. So they'll have pretty broad representation on that. It's not going to be some big litmus test where you have to, prove that you are for a certain kind of PFD, but they're going to go over the party platform with you and see if you are authentic. And so it's a pretty big deal, and we'll be hearing more about it for sure. But you read it first at Must Read Alaska. I think I've laid it out pretty carefully. They've also changed some of the rules for how they censure people, but and when that censure expires and what the percentage of votes need to be. But let me tell you, this rule of changing the definition of party membership, it passed unanimously, and the entire state central committee was there. I mean, everybody was there. So it is very, very strongly supported in the party. There's no equivocation about this. It's supported.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah. It was a really interesting, but there were lots of amendments, and there was lots of sort of iterations for it, and some people kind of got lost in the weeds. And I finally had to sort it out last night exactly what happened, because I wasn't 100% sure when I left Fairbanks yesterday on Saturday night. I wasn't 100% sure what exactly precipitated there, but that's what happened. It was really interesting.
Well, any other tidbit takeaways? We got a couple more minutes here of the convention, or any nuggets of wisdom that you walked away with?
Well, other than there's a lot of stories up online about the convention. For instance, Ann Brown was elected as the chair of the party. And then Mike Robbins, who we know ran for mayor last year and didn't make it, but he now works for Dave Bronson. He runs the Downtown Partnership. He was voted in as vice chair. Craig Campbell stepped back from being the vice chair. I believe that he's running the airport now, and he's just super, super busy. And they elected their officers. Trevor Shaw is Trevor Shaw out of Ketchikan is assistant secretary, and the secretary is Charlene Totfest from Kenai. You know her, right? Mm-hmm. She's down there in the Republican Women, so Kenai. So they got their officers in place, and it was a really good convention. I think the Republican women of Fairbanks need to be really congratulated on doing a fantastic job. Obviously, the venue was a little bit too small for the number of people who wanted to attend. It was oversold. And we had Ronna McDaniel, of course, on our podcast on Thursday, right?
Yeah, big deal.
Yeah, and you and I enjoyed that. She was so if you want to go back and listen to that, folks, it was a really fun interview with Ronna McDaniel, who's the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, and she was bouncing along through the frost heaps because for some reason she decided to stop in Anchorage and then drive to Fairbanks, and that's a long drive. It's a good 6-hour drive at this time of year. But she was bouncing along through the frost heap, so we had to kind of put her on black so she wouldn't be bouncing along on the camera. But she did a great job, and we were so excited to have her. That's a pretty big deal. She spoke, represented Brian Mast from Florida, who I really didn't know anything about him before he arrived there. And man, he was amazing. I mean, he's a solid American. I was very impressed with him. And I don't know, people had a good time, John.
That's awesome. Sounds like it was all in all a good experience.
It was. So, well, I know we've got to go, and we really want to thank Charlie Pierce. I'll let you thank Charlie Pierce for sponsoring this, because he's a good patriot and a good friend of the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Charlie Pierce, for sponsoring the show. We appreciate it. Your sponsorship helps us get conservative news all over Alaska. I have a show coming up on Wednesday, which is very exciting. Donna Arduin will be on my show, the one and only. She is probably the most famous accountant in the political world in the United States. She's helped numerous governors, including Arnold Schwarzenegger and ours truly, Governor Mike Dunleavy. She does consulting for some of the biggest political names in the U.S., and she's going to be on our show on Wednesday morning.
Oh, that's fantastic. You guys are going to have a great show. I'll be tuning in. So if you're a supporter of Must Read Alaska, thank you so much, everybody. It really makes it possible for us to stand up for what's right in Alaska. and keep the mainstream media on their toes. And they do need to be kept on their toes. Your help is what helps us give conservatives a voice in Alaska. So if you like the news that we provide at mustreadalaska.com, hit the donate button on the right side of the page and help us out. There are lots of costs to keeping this thing running. And well, John, I really appreciate you helping me keep the lights on here by selling whatever ads you can also sell. Those also help people. If you want to buy an ad, we really appreciate it. And John has a podcast on Wednesday. I'll be tuning in. James Basin has the podcast on Friday. Can't wait to hear what he's got in mind. So until next week, I'm signing off from somewhere in Alaska. Bye, everybody.